Hi and welcome back to Bike Speed. So this week we're going to service this Condor road bike. During this video we're going to do the bottom bracket bearings, we're going to do all the cables on this bike, we're going to fully strip down this bike, clean it all up and just routinely go through it and make sure that everything on this bike is working as it should be. So as you can see, this is a pretty utilitarian type of bike. It's a commuter style of bike. It's maybe not your full out and outright racer bike, although you can take this on your long distance riding and cope with this more than admirably. But this bike has been used as a utility bike, so we're going to really go to town on this one with the cleanup. So we're going to strip this bike down fully. You can see how the mud and dirt is built up on this bike where it's used daily, and then we're going to deal with little things like this derailleur cable here. You can see how that's got a heavy kink where it meets that frame there. This tail is actually just slightly too long for the bike, so you've got this huge kink on there, and it's just little subtle things like that. We're going to try and get this bike really nice along the way, so those little things like that are dealt with and sorted out. You can see the derailleur itself here was, quite built up with road film. There was a lot of sort of gritty film on this bike, so I'd imagine this bike is used sort of around back roads and just generally has a build up of miles and miles of riding. You can see in that rear arch there the build up on the arches. Again, you can only really get in there when the bike is stripped down. When you're using it day to day, those mud guards on this bike actually fitted nice and tight to the tyres, so quite hard to get in there to clean them down. So that's what we're going to deal with. And you can see there on that chain set as well how there's the mud and debris on the back of this bike. Under a normal service, when I do a normal service, I will always wash a bike down, but you cannot get in those nitty gritty places like you can when you do a full detailing like we're doing on this bike today, where we strip it right down to the frame and every component is washed down and cleaned down. Very hard to do that under a normal service. But even things like these thumb adjusters here, I remove those, I clean them all up, clean the threads, grease them, lubricate them, so that moving forward the bike is absolutely sort of all the little problems that I see along the way with other bikes that I service are dealt with when I do a full strip down like this. For example, those thumb adjusters on the frame, they'll often seize, but what I do is once I've cleaned those, I will lubricate them before I put them back together with an anti-seize grease, so that hopefully they won't seize in the future. You can see how dry, when I'm stripping this brake down, that sort of powdery dust on the bench there is all dry corrosion where the part hasn't been lubricated quite properly, the mounting bolts and things. So we just clean all those up and deal with all those problems along the way. It's sort of things that historically I get used to seeing that I try to deal with in a service, so that it's future proofing the bike, so that the next service hopefully will be easier to deal with the bike right the way through. It's the task that you have in hand on that day. So parts that we've put through the ultrasonic cleaner, we then just wash down with warm soapy water. In this instance, actually, even after they've been through degreaser, some of these parts really needed some work because there was a lot of oil film that had impregnated with road film, and it was quite a workout, this one. This bike, actually, we filmed this over a day and a half of filming, and they were long. The full day was a long day. It's amazing how long, when we're filming a bike, how much longer it takes than if I was just routinely doing the bike without the stop starting of filming. The filming process for the YouTube typically makes a job take about 3 times as long as normal, and then obviously Simon then takes that footage away and he'll spend pretty much a full day editing down to the stage where I'm at tonight with a voiceover, and then he'll spend another half a day just getting the video ready and uploading it onto YouTube. So quite a lengthy process involved with getting one of these videos out to you, but it's all part and parcel of what we do at Bike Speeds on a daily basis, and we just love, especially the videos, we love doing these. So you can see now I'm washing all the bits down, everything's beginning to look a lot nicer than when we started stripping it down. And so we'll strip a bike down, we'll go to component form, we'll get everything washed down, all these little nuts and bolts. And actually this bike was quite a complex machine, really. There was an awful lot of nuts and bolts on the bench when we finished getting everything prepped. So there we're just using the Shimano premium grease on the jockey wheels. We use things like the Loctite on these bolts that hold the derailleur together. Just sort of things like here, anti-seize grease on the thumb adjusters. There's something that regularly seize on rear derailleurs. In fact, this one was almost at the point of being quite hard to get apart, but with a little bit of anti-seize grease, and then I also put a little bit of general purpose grease inside the thumb adjuster, so where the cable sits in there, it never sticks to that thumb adjuster, because sometimes you can have a thumb adjuster that's fine, but the cable itself, the ferrule on the end, is absolutely welded tight inside the thumb adjuster. and there's no adjustment to be had. A little bit of grease on when I'm rebuilding the chain set as well. Again, they tend to stick, they tend to be very hard to pull apart. So your future servicing, if you grease it and you know that'll then help that come apart in the future, that's something else that I would do along the way, which is what I did with this bike. And we're just going to clean these pads up. Now you'll be amazed the difference we make on these pads. One set had been replaced. They were actually both slightly different materials from each other, but you'll see here, look at the ones on the top, how shiny and sparkly they are. I've cleaned down the actual framework itself, skimmed the pad surface just so that that's all back to a fresh surface, and you can see what a difference you can make there. Now on the discs, I always sand these down because they get quite a lot of scoring in them. They become a bit like an old vinyl record where they have these little lines in them. It's probably your number one reason for squealing brakes is the actual surface of the disc itself. So I give that a little clean up, and I'm cleaning off the rust on the arms there as well. So you can see, you know, that's now in reasonable condition. Plenty of miles left in that. There's no need to replace that. And again, when I'm servicing a bike, I'm looking to see what needs replacing, what we can salvage. You know, ultimately, if I went to town on this bike, I could replace the entire bike except for the frame, and that's not what a service is all about. You know, we're not doing a full-on restoration when we're servicing a bike. We're weighing up what parts do need fully replacing, what parts need servicing, as in lubricating. So we've already checked the headset bearings on this. We've already checked the wheel bearings. Some of the video comments, people say, oh, you didn't do the wheel bearings, you didn't do the headset bearings, whatever it be. They have been checked and they are okay. You know, you can even argue that, well, you haven't even lubricated them, but obviously some of these are sealed bearings, so they don't need lubricating. They're lubricated for the lifetime of the bearing and things like that. So we're always going through a bike, checking everything as we go. Some jobs we even do that we don't do on camera. So there's some things that you may think haven't been done or checked, but I can assure you they have been, especially where we're going down, right down to a frame like this on this bike. So next up, we're washing this bike down. We've now cleaned up all the components. We're just going to wash through the frame. So we've got all the thicker debris off with a brush. Then we washed it down. Now we're just using a microfiber towel to dry it off. And next up, we go to the polishing stage. We favour Auto Glim. We're not sponsored by Auto Glim, unfortunately, but we do favour Auto Glim. It's a lovely polish, a nice creamy polish. It will get a lot of the greases and road film, anything that's left on the frame. It will really help remove all those sort of marks. And it's just a very nice feeling polish to use. So we polish the bike down. So initially we go right through the bike. I even did the inside of the mud guards on this bike because they do build up with dirt and mud through the daily using. And the fact that they are hard to wash because they're so close to the tyre on this bike, it had a nice fitting set of mud guards on this. So I cleaned the inside edges of those as well, just so that any future dirt will not sort of grip that mud guard quite so firmly, so as when I wash it down next time, it should make my life a little bit easier, or even the rider's life a little bit easier in the future. We've done this polishing stage, and now what we do with all stripped down rebuilds now is we actually ceramic coat the frame as well. So again, it's not a Grim product we use. It's kind of like the juggling act between commercial viability to a bike and not. The Auto Glim ceramic spray is a lovely, relatively quick spray to use. So you literally spray it on, buff it off. I mean, this video sped up an awful lot. You know, this is still a process in itself, but this is one of the quickest ceramic sprays. We've experimented quite a lot with ceramic sprays, and the Auto Glim one's a nice fast one to use, so that's why we use that one. We've got now all the frames ceramic coated, including the inside of those wheel arches, the outsides, the frame, and then we wash down the wheel. Now the hub in there, I actually used brake cleaner on that because degreaser will actually sit on a component for a long while and can work its way into like the bearings. So I use a brake spray because it evaporates off very quickly. You work very fast, it gets the hub nice and clean, and then I used a degreaser on the actual rims of this bike to get road film and things, and you know, obviously you get the centrifugal force of oil in the chain. It always ends up around the rim of the bike. So again, I've just ceramic coating this wheel as well because of that, what I've just been saying about oils and things sticking to the outside edge. And you know, I know that wheel's now nice. Now the last thing I'm just going to do on this wheel, which I've talked about in many of our videos, is just lining up that manufacturer's logo over the valve. It's just something I like to do. I think it just sort of tidies everything up on a wheel. It just centralizes everything. It also makes it a little bit easier when you get a puncture to identify where in the tyre, where in the tube a puncture has been created from, and also allows you to keep an eye on punctures and things, so you know whether they're in the same place and everything else. It just marries everything up. So logo's now square. Inflated the tyre, a little bit of grease on this hub before we put on the cassette, and then torque up the lock ring on that cassette there. So you can see how clean that cassette is looking now. So that's all been through the ultrasonic cleaner. The hub is now all spotlessly clean. We torque up everything as well with a torque wrench. On goes that freshly skimmed disc where we've cleaned that braking surface on that. Again, torque up all the nuts. You can see I do opposites on there as well, so that the torquing pressure is even. And now we're just going to put in our new bottom bracket. This is a rotor bottom bracket. I quite like these at the moment. They're sort of my favourite at the moment, is the rotor bottom brackets. They're just very nicely manufactured. The machining of the part, sort of CNC machining of it, is lovely. So he's got a nice new rotor bottom bracket on there. And actually, in terms of the spin test, this was almost as good as any ceramic bearing I fitted. It really spun very, very nicely. So it's a lovely bottom bracket gone onto this bike. You can see how them components now are really popping out, really beginning to look good as we rebuild this bike. It's quite pleasurable because you know you've cleaned up the parts and the bike's coming back together and everything's feeling good. Now, one thing I did do with this bike was I actually replaced all the inner cables and parts of the outers, just so that everything was actuating, changing gear, braking, all those things that you want out of a bike to feel very, very nice when you get back on it and ride. So we literally put, and these are stainless steel cables that we use. They're what we call the super slick cables. They're a nice tightly wound steel cable, stainless steel cable. So we had new front brake, new rear brake, new front derailleur cable, new rear derailleur cable, so that everything as we rebuild we know is absolutely as spot on as we can possibly get it, with the components that are on the bike and the mileage remaining in those components. So that's what we're now just doing, is just rebuilding the bike. That should be nice when it all goes back together. So don't forget to like and subscribe. Do click all them buttons, you know, the notification bell, the like of the video, the subscribe to the channel, and do drop a comment. It helps with YouTube to serve that video up. It recognises that a video is popular if there's plenty of comments in there. So drop your comment below, tell us what you think about this sort of service, and you know, have you ever had your bike stripped down completely and serviced at your local bike shop? How much better did it feel for you riding it? You know, did you notice the difference? Let us know in the comments below. Drop all those in there. You can also head over to Instagram. We're quite busy on Instagram. We often post little stories about other jobs that we're doing that we haven't videoed. You know, we only tend to video full services for the channel. Now you can see here the chain on this bike. This is the original chain. It was actually too long. You can see how that rear derailleur, when you go small ring, you shouldn't have the chain rubbing against the derailleur like it is here. The derailleur should be mildly sprung. That will affect your actuation through all the gears because the derailleur will be sitting slightly differently to its access point. So we've shortened that chain now. You can see there's a little bit of gap on the small ring to small ring on the derailleur. Derailleur has a little bit of spring in it, so we've sorted out that little problem there. So the chain was shortened as well, and that probably came out of a packet, went on this bike, and no one would have known any difference, but it was just something I spotted as I was servicing the bike. So even these accessories, we've put a little bit of grease on those threads so that they'll always come in and out and won't stick to the bike. A little bit of B-screw adjustment on this one. There was quite a distance between the gear one and the derailleur jockey wheels, more than the sort of specified amount, so we altered the B-screw on there. A little bit of adjustment on the gear ends, because obviously everything's been off and gone back on, so it's never going to sit in the same place unless it was absolutely perfect before, but in this instance we know with the chain and everything it wasn't. So we've done a little bit of adjustments there, and it's now changing gear nicely, and then we just check the brakes and adjust those. And yeah, it was quite a pleasure doing this bike, really. Like I say, this was actually quite a time consuming one. This bike sort of just, I don't know, there was a lot of things about it that just took a little bit longer than maybe average time, you know, which built up over time. So it was quite a time consuming bike, but it was very, very rewarding. I really enjoy doing these jobs, you know, where you strip down a bike entirely and you see it coming up. Just very, very rewarding work this. So now we're just breezing through everything with a torque wrench. We torque every single nut and bolt that we can physically get to, you know, with ease, and we spec them all up and torque everything up, check everything, you know, pedals, the whole lot. We go through literally every nut and bolt. So I torque all the ones that have a spec, but anything that's in the frame, so bottle cages, mudguard brackets, bells, all those sort of things, you can see here I do those by hand and by feel, because it's very easy to strip those threads out by over talking or getting that wrong. So I tend to do all those, anything on the frame that's not a mechanical part, I tend to do by feel and by hand. Finally, we oil up that chain, so I now know this bike's absolutely ready to go. What a difference we've made to this bike, I think you'll agree. This one came up absolutely beautifully given how debris ridden it was before. I hope this rider enjoys the bike. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you'll join us next week. So thanks for watching, and bye for now.